What's up, Fantasy World? This is your boy William Spencer, and today the guys over at Fantasy Football Pilots have asked me to do a breakdown of one of my favorite teams, the Dallas Cowboys. So, from top to bottom, I'm going to give you my breakdown of who you need to be targeting for your fantasy team, who could be some sleepers, and who you should be targeting late in drafts, just in case you're, depending on your strategy, what you like to do, may be able to help you out. So from the top, we're going to start with my boy, Dak Prescott. Now, a lot of people didn't think that he was really good last year in the early part of the fantasy season from weeks 1 to 8. And in that time, he didn't really look that good. From weeks 1 to 8, he was only the QB 23. But after he got Amari Cooper, he went up from the latter half of the season. He ended up as the QB 8 from weeks 9 to 17. He also finished as the QB 10 at the end of the season last year. So Dak Prescott does have some value. Now he gets a complete offseason where he gets to work with Amari Cooper. He has Randall Cobb, Jason Witten has returned. Ezekiel Elliott is being used more in the passing game. They also have Tony Pollard, Michael Weber, and Michael Gallup gets to take another year to gel with Dak Prescott. It looks like he's going to have a promising season this year. Another thing you might want to consider is the fact that Dak Prescott is in a contract year. That means he's going to try and show out so that way he can get paid. And if he shows out for the Dallas Cowboys, he's going to show out for your fantasy team. Dak Prescott's current fantasy draft value is probably somewhere between the 13th and 14th round. So that means he's not really getting drafted in most leagues or 12-team leagues. So that means he could be found at the end of the draft when you're looking to draft a QB. Now, if you're the type that wants to wait, this could be the perfect opportunity to grab a guy who won't be drafted in the top 12, but could finish as a top 10 QB for 2019. Now let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott. Right now, Ezekiel Elliott is probably looking at, rumors have, for the most part, have been saying that he's going to hold out of camp. If he does, that could be a detriment, but right now let's talk about if he does show up for camp and is a play for week 1. Ezekiel Elliott is what makes the ground game for the Dallas Cowboys so prolific. Let's use that word. Now, Ezekiel Elliott finished as a top 5 running back in fantasy last year. He had over 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns rushing, and 3 receiving. Now, what everyone wants to see, including myself, is that those touchdowns on the ground go up. If he can get to double-digit touchdowns, as well as being an asset in the passing game in the red zone, sky's the limit for this guy. Like I said, he finished top 5 with just 9 total touchdowns last season. He's going to get the work. He's the workhorse back for the Dallas Cowboys. He does have some help this year with Michael Weber and Tony Pollard, and Tony Pollard is rumored to have a significant role in the Cowboys offense this year. But that's not going to hit Ezekiel Elliott's carries or snaps for the Cowboys. So Ezekiel Elliott is going to be that number 1 target in most fantasy drafts. Right now, Ezekiel Elliott is being targeted in the first round around 102 or 101. It's between him and Saquon Barkley in most fantasy drafts for the first overall pick. So you know how valuable Ezekiel Elliott can be. Now let's move on to somebody else that should be targeted in the Cowboys offense, Amari Cooper. Despite playing for 2 different teams last year with the Oakland Raiders and the Cowboys, Amari Cooper still managed to finish as a top 20 wide receiver. He had just over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, 725 yards with the Cowboys alone. Can you imagine a full year with the Cowboys, even with their passing offense not being as stellar as it was? Amari Cooper is going to get the volume targets, he's going to get looks in the red zone, and he's gaining the trust of quarterback Dak Prescott. All of those mold into a wide receiver who's going to have or should have a good year this year. Amari Cooper is currently being drafted early in the 3rd round. If you're looking or waiting on a wide receiver because you're trying to go running back heavy, he might be the guy you want to target. There's a couple guys that may be going ahead of him, like AJ Green, but Amari Cooper could be one of the lower end wide receiver ones that you could grab and not have to spend too high of a draft pick to get. You don't have to reach for him either because, like I said, he's going somewhere early in the third round. Another guy in the receiving core for the Dallas Cowboys that I think you should keep your eye on is Michael Gallup. He's been getting buzz this offseason as he's been able to continue to work with his relationship with Dak Prescott. He's continuing to gel. They're getting their timing down, and if they continue to trend in this way, Michael Gallup could be a surprise add for your fantasy team. He's not being drafted, partly because of how the Cowboys' passing game looked last season, but that shouldn't deter you from looking at him during the course of the season, keeping an eye on his progress, and seeing how he goes during the course of the season. He could be a nice waiver add in the event that you lose a wide receiver drops from the team, or a wide receiver that you can scoop up on a waiver wire to help your team out. Michael Gallup isn't really being drafted in fantasy this year, so you don't have to waste a draft pick to get him. He's probably going to make it to your waiver wire this year. But like I said, just keep an eye on him, see how his progress goes, and if he starts to turn up a little bit, you might want to consider adding him. Now we're going to get into our tight ends. And I'll be honest with you, the tight end position doesn't really look like a fantasy asset right now. You do have Jason Witten returning. You do have Danny Schultz and Blake Jarwin who are still there. If I had to pick one, I would probably lean towards Blake Jarwin. We know what Jason Witten can do or has done in the past, but he's had a year off from football. He hasn't played. He wasn't that good in the booth, and I know that doesn't have anything to do with fantasy, but still. The year off might have helped him recover from the rigors of playing in every game, every season, every game. He's the Iron Man, but he looked like he lost a step in 2016. He was slowing down in 2017, and which eventually led to him retiring for the 2018 season. Blake Jarwin was looking promising. We all know the Week 17 game he had against the Giants where he scored 3 touchdowns. That was excellent. But the fact that the tight end position was hardly used last year kind of puts a damper on his value as well. If Blake Jarwin can somehow steal the reins from Jason Witten and show the Cowboys offense that he can be an every down type of player, you could see a change in the guard for the tight ends. Like I said, Jason Witten is going to get the starting looks because they just love him down there, and as they should. But you got to let the young guys get in and get their time now, and that's the only way that you can do it. But right now, as far as fantasy, you're probably not looking at either Jason Witten or Blake Jarwin right now. If I had to put a label on either of them, Witten's not going to be draft worthy, and Blake Jarwin is probably going to be a deep sleeper because while there's not a lot of talent in the tight end position as a whole, you're not going to probably waste a draft pick to try and get him. Another guy I want to talk about real quick before we wrap this up is Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's been a guy who's been getting a lot of buzz this offseason during OTAs and minicamp. He's a wide receiver converted into a running back. The Cowboys, I believe they took him in the 4th round of the 2019 draft. He's a guy that they're looking at to complement Ezekiel Elliott. He can be used in the passing game. He has a lot of speed. He can be used in the running game. He can play the slot. He's a piece that is very versatile, and they're looking to get him involved into the offense. If I had one issue about Tony Pollard, is that Stephen Jones came out and said, "Oh, we're going to get Tony Pollard the ball." We saw how that worked out last season when he said the same thing about Tavon Austin. If Kellen Moore is smart and he knows that they are trying to use Tony Pollard, or he's trying to use Tony Pollard, it could bode well for him this season. But he's probably more about the deepest of sleepers. The only reason he might get any time right now is because Ezekiel Elliott could or could not hold out. If he does intend to hold out and get a new contract, you might not see him during training camp. So he might get more reps, which might be able to show the brass that he's more than capable of coming out there and being an asset. If Ezekiel Elliott were to miss any time, I'd probably lean towards Tony Pollard that would get that extra snaps in his absence. That'll do it for this breakdown of the Dallas Cowboys. Make sure you go over and follow the guys at Fantasy Football Pilots on Twitter at FF_pilots. Make sure you check out the website too at fantasypilots.com. You can also follow me on Twitter as well at IamHyperion_FPH. Hit us up anytime. We always like to talk fantasy football. The pilots have other things that are coming down the pike that they want to share with you guys. So make sure that you stay alert to their tweets and notifications, things like that. And I hope you win your fantasy league this year. If you listen to us, you probably will.